Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening po sa lahat. Saan mong pong panig kayo naroon sa mundo. Welcome to our 178th episode of Stop COVID's webinar series brought to you by the University of the Philippines. Thank you for being part of our credible online community. And to all those who have just discovered us and starting the year right, welcome po. Sana po marami po kayong matutunan sa ating webinar for today. In recent years, an invisible menace has infiltrated our lives, affecting our well-being in ways we may not fully understand. Ito po yung tinatawag na endocrine disruptors. These are chemicals, compounds that interfere with the delicate balance of hormones sa ating endocrine system at nagkakaroon po siya ng physiological and reproductive effects po para sa atin. And from common household items to industrial byproducts, ito po ay pwede pong makita in unexpected places and exposing us to potential health risks that demand our attention. So sa webinar pong ito, pag-uusapan po natin saan po yung matatagpuan, ano po yung mechanism, paano po tayo naapektuhan, at ano po yung consequences ng pagiging exposed po dito po sa mga tinatawag na endocrine disruptors sa ating environment. Pag-uusapan din po natin yung ano po ba yung mga synthetic chemicals, natural substances, paano po ba nito nagagaya, namimimik o na di-disrupt po or interfere dun po sa mga hormones na critical po sa ating development and well-being. I'm Dr. Raymond Francis Sarmiento, Director of the National Telehealth Center, National Institutes of Health, University of the Philippines, Manila. Always a pleasure to be with all of you during our regular Friday and always looking forward to Fridays with my co-host po, our adjunct research faculty, also international renowned public health communications expert, Dr. Susie Pineda Mercado. Dr. Susie?
Hi, good afternoon, Raymond, and good afternoon to everybody. It's great to be here and to see all of your names on the chat. Friday is really a day we look forward to because we always learn a lot. And I think our topic today, Raymond, is so exciting, no? I once listened to a lecture on endocrine disruptors, and they were talking about endocrine disruptors in animals. So they were saying yung mga birds, hindi na malaman kung male or female. Pati yung mga isda, merong mga ganun, ano? So
Wow.
I think when we talk about it in relation to human beings, it's also very important kasi there's so many chemicals in our environment, no? And from pollution, from food that we eat, and all of that. So I
So pag
think
kinain ba natin yun, Dr. Susie, hindi mo alam kung lalaki babae, may epekto ba yun sa atin?
yun ang hindi ko alam. Yun ang hindi ko alam, Raymond, no? Kasi sabi nga nila, I've been watching all these videos on, there's a good Netflix series on You Are What You Eat, something like that, no? So it's talking about how beef and chicken and pork is produced in the United States, no? And of course, it's different in our country, but we still do import a lot of food. At pag nakita nyo talagang kakaiba kasi they give so much antibiotics para hindi magkasakit yung mga animals, and they give hormones para yung chicken lumaki yung breast. Diba yung mga US imported chicken breast ang lalaki. So the breast of the chicken is so big that the bird cannot stand up because of the hormones that it gives. Can you imagine? So, nako sabi ng doctor ko kasi mag-plant-based ang daw ako, di ba? So napapaisip talaga ako pag kumakain ako ng meat because of these chemical disruptors and all. Anyway, great to be with you all here on a Friday. And pang ilan na nga natin to, Raymond?
178.
178. So I wanted to share with our audience, okay? If you look at the opening billboard of Stop COVID Deaths, nako ang dami nang nagbago. Hindi ba since the time we started? Of course, some things are still the same. But like Ted became Secretary of Health, di ba? Then just moved on. We have a new chancellor. And Stella is playing a new role in our work. So I just wanted to tell our audience, next week we'll be off air. Don't worry, next week lang. Diba? Next Friday will be off air. And we're trying to find a way to kind of update
Kailangan natin yung I think the break will serve us in a way, as we transition to a new format for the show, it doesn't mean that yung mga nakasanayan nyo na po na nandito po sa ating show will be out po, no? But something that we're looking at, maybe incorporating some of the other elements that we have that we're excited to show you, and that's because marami po tayong pinag-uusapan in a webinar, medyo mahirap po natin yung mapag-usapan. Okay, I think there are connection issues for Dr. Susie, so I'll continue on with our program po, no? So as you have seen in our opening billboard, we have transitioned to broader discussions, but that will be in this new reformatted show will be tackling a bit more and a lot more that we have tried to slowly incorporate in the last year and a half, but we wanted to be able to make it a little bit more comprehensive in that way. So abangan po ninyo yung ating reformatting. Again, just a quick announcement lang po. We'll be taking a break lang po very quickly next week. Pero after that, babalik po kami just to give that pause and that time for reformatting, Dr. Susie.
Oo, sinabi ko lang na take a break tayo, bigla akong nag-drop. Ano ba yun? O sige, anyway, everyone, we've got great guests for you today. As usual, only the best for the Stop COVID Death community. And we have, well, first of all, batiin natin lahat yung mga nasa TVUP YouTube channel, those of you who are with us live on the webinar. Ginawa mo na ba yun, Raymond? Di pa?
Not yet, Dr. Susie.
Okay. UP System Facebook page, UP TV, TVUP Facebook page, Stop COVID Deaths Facebook page, and of course, UP TV, Signal TV, Channel 101. Main presenter for today, Dr. Lydia Llamas Clark, who is a professor and attending consultant from the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology and UP Philippine General Hospital. Our reactor is Dr. Ina Irabon, who is a practicing reproductive endocrinology and infertility specialist at Asia Hospital and Medical Center, as well as at the Perpetual Health Medical Center. Okay, so Raymond, you want to introduce our person on the street?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Susie. So, for those who are asking kung ano po ito pong person on the street, just to gauge po kung ano po yung alam ng common folks on the street on the topic at hand, just maybe setting a baseline kung ano po yung knowledge po nila for the topic. And for this week, the questions, or at least some of the questions that we ask, ano-ano po ang mga produktong ginagamit ninyo sa pang-araw-araw, at alam nyo po bang maaaring makaapekto ang mga materialis nito sa inyong kalusugan? Narinig nyo na ba na maaaring maapektuhan ang inyong hormones ng mga tinatawag na vinyl, plastics, carpet materials, cosmetics, canned good packaging, and non-stick materials na matatagpuan sa cooking pans? At ano-ano sa mga produktong ito ang madalas ninyong gamitin sa pang-araw-araw? Please watch this.
Bilang janitors, gumagamit kami ng Sondrox, mga panini-CR, sabon.
Well, sa bahay, sa pagluluto, gumagamit kami ng mga frying pan na bili sa market. Usually, mga cast iron o kaya yung mga walang coating ng Teflon.
Pag naglilinis kasi ako sa bahay, gumagamit ako ng bleach, yung mga Embrace, and mga laundry detergent yan, syempre, pag naglalaba.
Siyempre po, ang mga nanay, nakakawilian po yung mga non-stick pan, ganyan po. Tsaka umuuso rin po yung silicone na mga utensils. So, yun po yung mga gamit ko sa pagluluto.
Oh, alam ko naman, kaya lang kasi kailangan namin gamitin eh. Kasi pag hindi namin ginamit, paano namin malilinis yung aming trabaho?
Opo, may konti po akong alam sa mga coating ng mga frying pan na masama sa katawan. Pero exactly hindi ko po alam yung epekto.
Alone, I didn't think na pag na-inhale ko siya is magka-problema. By itself, isang product, I didn't think na makakapit siya.
Alam ko po, pero not exactly yung kung ano yung mga side effect ng paggamit ng mga plastic na ito.
Opo, kaya lang no choice. Kailangan natin gumamit eh.
So, narinig ko po at yun nga po may masamang epekto sa katawan. Pero yung tungkol sa specific na endocrine ay hindi pa ako informed tungkol dito.
Definitely no, I didn't think na ma-affect naman. Kasi those are daily products na ginagamit eh.
Ang paggamit ko po ng mga produkto na ito ay limitado or kung maaari ay iniiwasan para hindi magkaroon ng mga karamdaman na dulot ng mga produktong ito.
Sa pagluluto po, maigi po yata na yung mga cast iron yung ginagamit sa pagluto para maiwasang ma-scratch yung mga lutuan na ito at na maisama sa pagkain yung mga coatings, especially yung mga teflon o mga non-stick materials na may component na polymers na nakakasama sa katawan.
Mag-ingat na lang po tayo, ilimit na lang po natin kung sakali yung paggamit natin ng mga produktong nakakasama sa kalusugan po.
Okay, thank you so much, TVUP. Meron dun isa, no? Maalam, Dr. Susie?
Yeah. Parang, sabi ko actually, there are more and more people who are studying this, no? Kasi naiintindihan na ng taong bayan na yung mga sakit natin, mga cancer, mga ganyan, ay maaring manggaling talaga sa mga chemical na hindi naman dapat na pumapasok sa katawan natin, no? So, maganda ating, thank you so much, TVUP, for the person on the street. Raymond, you've got some, ano ba to?
Housekeeping, yes.
Housekeeping, sige.
Yes, so for those who are asking po, no, and especially for those na parang I'm not sure if we're still investigating, we have received a lot of those messages yung wherein the name that's reflected on the certificate is not your name, it's someone else's name, it's not even the name of the phone. So that's the one that we're looking at and trying to validate po, no. But for those who are asking, you will need to be present at least 50% of the webinar duration for you to be able to receive po etong certificate of attendance. For any questions po, you can email us at stopcovidets@up.edu.ph. For our webinar today, we'll have a standard panel discussion format. We'll have a main presenter and reactor, and that will be followed by a Q&A session. Dr. Susie.
Okay, let's get our webinar underway. And let me introduce our main speaker. Our main presenter is a professor and attending consultant from the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, UP, PGH. Welcome, Dr. Erlidia Llamas Clark. Dr. Erlidia, welcome.
Welcome, Ma'am Susie, once again. I'm not sure if I'm coming out really good from here. I'm in the hospital. And
Teka,
I think meron lang pong meron pong
got a
virtual
filter.
background that's
You've got
a
a
little bit
filter on.
covering your your video.
I'm not sure. Wait lang. I have.
Yan.
Ayan.
That's
Okay na
better.
po.
That's
Oo.
better
Tao
po.
na po ba?
Oo, okay. Sige, go ahead, Doctor.
No, we have a video recording for Dr.
po.
Clark kasi she anticipated she'll
Yeah,
be
good afternoon,
in the
ma'am.
hospital.
And
Opo.
Sir Raymond. Glad.
Yes po.
I'm really glad to be here again. Joining.
Sige, go ahead.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
the generous introduction and the opportunity to be part of today's webinar. I am Dr. Erlidia Llamas Clark, and I'm the principal investigator in a multidisciplinary team at the NIH Institute of Child Health and Human Development, conducting a study under the DOST PCHRD Water and Teratogen Endocrine Disruptors Fetal Maternal Health Program. This is the outline of my talk. I will define some terms, introduce the public health impacts of endocrine disruptors, and highlight how it works in the body, its effects, and why we should be concerned. I will review the existing evidence of the general effects of endocrine disruptors and particular effects on women's health. I will conclude and recommend the research and knowledge gaps, practical pointers to address the concern of EDCs, and leave you with some key messages to reflect on. Endocrine disrupting chemicals have health impacts globally in the Philippines. I would like to begin with the history of how humans began to be entangled in the risky business of endocrine disruptors. Throughout human history, many chemicals and substances have been used as our basic needs evolved and socioeconomic systems developed. Production on a large scale coincided with the Industrial Revolution in Europe in the 18th century. In the textile industry, there was a high demand for clothes and linen, so there was an increase in the use of sulfuric acid and lime, such that our fashion and clothing started it all. When there was a high demand thereafter for glass and paper, many factories emerged and we needed so much chemical resources for production. Thereafter, some demand for sanitation, hygiene, and aesthetic products around the world as we ushered what we call modernism. As humans crave for our everyday needs and wants, this meant more consumption, more resources, and more volume of chemicals. With the increasing population, home and building construction industries use more raw materials and synthetic sources. Agriculture also has its own share with more demand for food production and availability. Pesticides were used and other food preservatives for longer shelf life. Medicines and drugs were also developed for both animals and humans. What about the effects of EDCs on women's health? This afternoon, we would like to focus on this, including pregnancy, maternal and fetal outcomes in the Philippines. Since the 1940s, there's been an exponential increase in the number of these manufactured chemicals, some of which were released into the environment. This chemical revolution changed ecosystems in a manner that had severe impacts not only on wildlife but also human health. In 1962, the American marine biologist and conservationist Rachel Carson, in her book The Silent Spring, issued the first public warning that environmental contamination, in particular the pesticide DDT, might be responsible for a reduced number of birds due to reproductive failure. Our Stolen Future, authored by Theodora Colburn, a zoologist, put forth the endocrine disruptor hypothesis. But first, let us define endocrine disruptors. They are chemicals, synthetic materials that interfere with the body's endocrine system. Endocrine disruptors interfere with the natural hormones and deregulate many important physiological activities by exhibiting hormone-like effects that disturb hormonal signals of an organism. These chemicals are in itself useful, but it can be environmental pollutants from household and industrial items that can be a source of exposure from oral, dermal, or different routes. The endocrine system is a set of organs which regulates growth, development, and controls important functions in humans and animals. Estrogens help to regulate bone development, blood clotting, female puberty, and the menstrual cycle. Many of the changes that occur during pregnancy and fetal development are controlled by estrogen. Testosterone, on the other hand, helps male fetuses develop, regulates male puberty, and promotes sperm production. Another is the thyroid hormones that affect brain development, energy level, appetite, heart rate, and metabolism. Other hormones are equally important, secreted by the hypothalamus in the brain, pituitary, pineal, and parathyroid, and the adrenal glands. These hormones are slow-acting with long-lasting effects and can be disturbed by hormone-disrupting agents. In 1992, Theodora Colburn first published the theory that chemicals in the environment may be disrupting hormones and causing health problems. And since then, the general concept of endocrine disruption has gone from a very radical theory to a seemingly accepted fact. Scientific debates then raged and focused such that there is a risk to the general population of humans and animals from the low exposure levels of endocrine disrupting chemicals. Scientists agree that some chemicals mimic or block hormonal effects in wildlife population from EDC's contaminated areas, that some humans also have been affected in unusual circumstances. Others believe that most of the endocrine disruptors are weaker than our natural hormones and most people and animals are exposed to such low levels that maybe they are unlikely to have any health effects. Then the debate for many years until now is either really to prove or disprove health effects from low dose exposures to common chemicals, because it is a complex, challenging topic and needs a lot of time. The sources of endocrine disruptors can be natural or manufactured chemicals. They fall into the general categories industrial, agricultural, residential, pharmaceutical, and heavy metals. BPAs, dioxins, PFAS, phthalates, among others, usually enter the body through inhalation and in food or by direct contact, and are found in the water and food packaging, cooking materials, plastics, personal care products, and sanitizers, among others. While their use was intended for good, the public in general, and more specifically women, are unaware of their active exposure to these potentially slow-acting toxic substances. The interest in endocrine disrupting chemicals is due to the health effects, their use and mechanism of actions. Key concerns include the increasing trends of many endocrine-related disorders, mainly in the nervous and reproductive system, including metabolism, as you can see in this slide. What do endocrine disruptors do, and how do they work in the body? They can affect the body in three main ways. It blocks the pathway between a natural hormone and a receptor. They act directly on a gland, causing it to make too much or too little of a hormone, and they mimic a hormone, causing the body to overreact or to react at the wrong time. EDCs can act in different ways as it interacts with the hormonal pathways depending on the dose, tissue type, and sex. The hormonal pathways may either be stimulated or inhibited, as some EDCs bind to the receptor for a natural hormone. The mechanisms of action of EDCs and its pervasive effects poses many questions that are currently without answers. The complexity of this area needs further research to understand the action of EDCs. Compared to other substances, EDCs' effects are nonlinear and not similar to the usual toxic dose-effect relationship we are accustomed to. So much more needs to be understood, as the presence of many EDCs in our environment may have either additive and/or synergistic and/or antagonistic interactions. So the timing of exposure, time lapse between exposure and observed effects, and the possible transgenerational effect is a challenge. For example, bisphenol A can attach to the estrogen receptor, and the EDC can act as an agonist and activate the receptor, or it can bind to the receptor as antagonist to the hormonal action. Hence, EDCs can interfere with the body's endocrine system, producing abnormal growth patterns, neurodevelopmental delays in children, and adverse effects in the development of the human reproductive, neurological, and immune systems. We need to remember some basic concepts on the effects of EDCs on human health. There is a developmental basis of disease such that it affects human health, but they are not apparent in early life but can progress to adulthood. A window of vulnerability or critical exposure during fetal life may affect development of disease in a particular organ. We need to be careful to the synergistic effects of EDCs. For example, because we are having the obesity epidemic, we need to look at this. If you look at the obesity epidemic, it coincided with the rapid increase in the use of industrial chemicals. The hypothesis is that exposure to chemicals combined with genetic predisposition and consumption of high caloric diet, then we can hypothesize that maybe these are major contributors to the obesity epidemic. Many studies are showing some trend. However, more research is underway to support this hypothesis. EDCs also seem to follow a non-traditional dose-response dynamics. This means that they mimic endogenous hormones but have unpredictable effects due to individual metabolism and body composition. And what is very important is the transgenerational effects, which believes that EDC exposures are transferred to the next generation due to altered gene expression. This is another area of interest for all of us. Connecting to this, I'd like to show you the sensitive developmental periods when EDC exposures greatly increase the risk of female reproductive disorders. As you can see in this slide, there are many diseases and conditions that develop from very early exposures in the uterus, and some suggest an epigenetic link that exposure effects to EDC can be passed to one's offspring, the children who will bear the future generation. For humans, there is a critical period of development for most organisms in between the transitions from a fertilized egg into a fully formed infant. This period needs to be protected to harmful exposures. As the cells begin to grow and differentiate, there are critical balances of hormones and protein changes that must occur. Although a dose of disrupting chemicals may do substantial damage to a developing fetus, the same dose may not significantly affect the adult mother. So as clinicians, we must be able to warn our women and give preconception counseling to better prepare themselves for a healthy conception and pregnancy. Over the years, there's an increasing trend towards non-communicable diseases such as obesity and diabetes, neurodevelopmental disorders, reproductive compromise, respiratory and thyroid dysfunction, and cancers, with suggestions that the unregulated use, production, and disposal of EDCs is a contributing factor. At this stage, how about the state of EDC exposure in the Philippines? As you know, our country is a transitioning economy from the pre-colonial period. Filipinos have not been really immune to the introduction of many chemicals used in daily living. And our homes and backyards, you can find many chemicals. By itself, the big challenge is understanding the potential effects of each substance. So waste disposal, management handling of its byproducts that have unknown and undesirable effects to agriculture, natural water systems, and human health. There's very limited knowledge and research, but there's a sense of high exposure of Filipinos to EDCs. For example, in Bulacan river systems, we have high concentration of nonylphenols used for industrial processes and in consumer laundry detergents, personal hygiene, automotive latex, paints, and lawn care products. So in a recent study, hormones like estrogen and progesterone and testosterone were seen, but also a high bisphenol A was detected in Laguna Lake. This coincides with higher detection of perfluoroalkyl substances or PFAS among women with breast cancer in Region 4A, the Laguna area, a heavily industrial region than the national capital. Over the last decade, scientific understanding of the relationship between exposure to endocrine disruptors and health has advanced rapidly, and exposure to fish and wildlife in urban regions due to continuous release of EDCs in effluents and to the atmosphere. The environmental releases of EDCs from the factories, manufacturing industries, use and disposal of personal care products and pharmaceuticals in waterways, exposure through the food system, among others, brought a real growing concern that maternal, fetal, and childhood exposure to EDCs could play a larger role in the causation of many endocrine diseases and disorders than previously believed. In the Philippines, our environmental health is still in its infancy. if you look at the study on blood levels of lead, showed that children and communities have exposures in the soil, paint, canned tuna, contaminated water, work exposure, battery recycling, and even breastfeeding when mothers are anemic. So pregnant women with lead exposure end up with adverse pregnancy outcomes such as spontaneous abortion, gestational hypertension, low birth weight, impaired neurodevelopment, all of which are present in our clinical setting. However, research is lacking. As part of the water FEMA, in 159 women who were surveyed from January 1 to 2022, we found that possible EDC containing household items such as carpets, linoleum, upholstered and stain-resistant furniture, and wallpapers, they are more prevalent in the homes of pregnant women compared to non-pregnant women. We also saw that non-pregnant women were 1.5 times more exposed to personal care products like lotions, and at this time during the pandemic, pregnant women were 1.3 times less exposed to hand sanitizers because they are actually staying at home most of the time. There are differences in the prevalence of exposure to household EDC containing items between pregnant and non-pregnant women, with the pregnant women having a higher prevalence of exposure. And this is something that is very interesting to research on further. Because of this survey, further, 4 common EDCs were explored and examined, detected in household items and personal care products. These are methylparaben, 2,4-dichlorophenoxyacetic acid, monobutyl phthalate, and bisphenol A after examining the urine of pregnant and non-pregnant women. We found high methylparaben concentrations in both non-pregnant and pregnant women. Non-pregnant women showed more exposure and high detection to monobutyl phthalate and methylparaben, and pregnant women had high detection of methylparaben. Of interest is the higher average of the herbicide weed killer 2,4-dichlorophenoxyacetic acid concentrations among non-pregnant women in general compared to the pregnant women. So, minimal BPA concentrations were detected in our urine samples of exposed and unexposed pregnant and non-pregnant participants. Thus, we concluded that exposure and detection of EDC concentrations between pregnant and non-pregnant individuals may vary and again needs further research. Aside from these, food chemicals such as nitrates, and agricultural herbicides and growth regulators like atrazine has been found to have poor pregnancy and fetal outcomes ranging from loss, death, congenital anomalies, and developmental delay. This will be the subject of our upcoming paper from our group looking at the pregnancy, maternal, and fetal outcomes from EDC exposures. So please watch this space. Our greatest challenge now is how do we protect human reproductive health from the apparent harm of EDCs? The biological effects of EDCs, as you have seen, are complex, and this complex interplay between timing and dose can lead to different effects. Specific biomarkers are required to monitor the effects. However, adverse effects linked to ED or endocrine disruptors cannot be anticipated using the classic dose exposure response relationship due to the non-linear dose effect relationship. Endocrine disruptor effects do not only depend on the dose but also on the timing of exposure and the sex of the exposed person. Thus, it remains a demanding and challenging scientific and regulatory issue. As we wait, we do our best to choose what substances goes into our body, like food, medicine, drugs, and practically personal and hygiene products that we encounter daily. Unfortunately, the EDCs are not just found in the industrial and agricultural products but also in the runoff of pesticides from treated fields and in the discharge of waste from industrial operations. Certain endocrine disruptors are not used anymore, but their residues linger in the food chain and they are consumed by humans in the form of fatty foods. Because it is difficult for people to make decisions as to how to avoid exposure to these endocrine disruptors, we need environmental health advocates. And we want to urge the government to regulate these chemicals more strictly. I believe this is something we should also advocate for, invoking the precautionary principle when scientific evidence is still lacking, but harmful effects seem to point to a possible causation. Exposure to EDCs and their effects on human and wildlife health are indeed global problems, but it also requires both global and local solutions. So in the Philippines, the presence of EDCs is pervasive and worrisome. However, there are not many local studies linking EDCs to adverse reproductive or maternal and child health outcomes. We are just starting. The sensitivity of the subject, our pregnant women and their fetuses, and the complexity of human response to EDC exposure makes it really more challenging. I urge that more research funding and support be given because it is highly needed. A precautionary principle is needed for the public and more mass media information and awareness should be advanced. More programs are needed that foster collaboration and data sharing among scientists and between governmental agencies and countries. To protect human health from the combined effects of EDC exposures, poor nutrition, and poor living conditions, there's indeed a need to develop programs and collaborations among developed and developing countries and those in economic transition. There's also a need to stimulate new adaptive approaches that break down institutional and traditional scientific barriers and stimulate interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary team science. The environmental program in the United States estimates that there are some 87,000 chemicals used in commerce and admits that there is not enough scientific data available to evaluate all potential risks. This is the EPA, the agency for handling these matters. No? So endocrine disruption represents a special form of toxicity. More support for research on women, non-pregnant and pregnant women, and their fetuses is really badly needed. But we need to research with care when designing studies to clarify the effects of EDCs and quantifying the risk to human and wildlife health, and also when interpreting the results. Overall, we need to advocate for policies to prevent exposure to toxic environmental chemicals, work for a healthy food system, and make environmental health part of healthcare, and we need champions for environmental justice. Looking back, no one planned for this toxic-laden future we have now, and our forefathers did not really think of the consequences of chemical use, food technology, and large-scale development in all sectors, including health and medicine. Individually, each of us has had an exposure to chemical substances, whether we like it or not. Some are more exposed than others, but in every one of us, since the time of our conception and growth and development, from childhood to adulthood, physical and functional changes in our tissues has happened, is happening, and will happen as more exposures come by. So in our life course, our knowledge, behaviors, and values shape our exposure and development of disease and any health condition. We can do something, make our people healthy and well by giving them information and awareness. Thank you for your attention and maraming salamat po. These are my references.
Wow, thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Dr. Lida.
Yeah.
Galing. I thought it was a great presentation, and we're looking forward to having you in the Q&A.
Q&A.
I think you've really opened our eyes to a lot of issues and I think I agree with you. We need more advocates and we should put more attention on this. So stay with us because I think we have some questions from the audience in a bit. But Raymond, please introduce our reactor.
Yes, thank you again, Dr. Lee Clark, for that wonderful presentation. But before I introduce po yung ating reactor, reminding everyone to put in your questions po dito po sa ating Q&A box. For those who are watching us outside of the Zoom, sa Facebook or sa YouTube, please put in your questions dun po sa comment section. We continue to scour them and try to select which ones will be asked sa ating mga panelists. I'd also like to take this opportunity to greet those who are joining us all the way from Hospital ng Binyan in Laguna, Oriental Mindoro Provincial Hospital in Calapan City, Oriental Mindoro, Western Visayas Medical Center in Iloilo City, DOH Eastern Visayas Center for Health Development in Samar, Southern Philippines Medical Center in Davao City, Sargent General Hospital in Surala, South Cotabato, as well as internationally from Chonin Hospital in Taipei City, Taiwan, Los Angeles, California, Lunichi Ali University of Blida II in Algeria, Jakarta, Indonesia, Villa Fontana Assisted Living in California, United States, Canadian Medical Center in Dammam, Saudi Arabia, as well as University of Ha'il in Saudi Arabia. Okay, next, our reactor today, very well-known reproductive endocrinology and infertility specialist practicing at Asian Hospital and Medical Center, as well as in Perpetual Health Medical Center. So please welcome po to our webinar for first time, Dr. Ina Iraban. Thank you po. Dr. Iraban, go ahead, ma'am.
Parang wala yata, Raymond, si Dr. Ina.
She's here, baka she might be having... Yeah, there we go.
Oh,
Okay.
now we can see you.
Awa.
Great.
You can unmute yourself, ma'am.
Hello
Go
po.
ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to join your discussion. Dr. Lee Clark was one of my mentors when I was a resident in training in the UPPJH. So congratulations, ma'am. That was really a very informative talk on EDCs. Now I was invited to join this discussion because I'm as a reproductive endocrinologist. So from the word reproduction, so dun lang po ako focus. So I will kind of focus more on the EDCs affecting reproduction, and this is just a very short reaction to Dr. Lee's dissertation. Anyway, so I also represent the Philippine Society for Reproductive Medicine, and in my society, we are recognizing the potential role of EDCs, especially when it comes to a possible etiologic agent for infertility, for endometriosis, for myometrium. And in our latest clinical practice guidelines, we actually already included the possible role of EDCs in the pathogenesis of PCOS, that's polycystic ovary syndrome. Now, we all know that recent evidence has made it really apparent that genetic, epigenetic, endocrine, metabolic, environmental factors are all the contributory factors that contribute to the development of PCOS. However, recent data or emerging data and more experts believe that EDCs may most probably play a role in the pathogenesis of PCOS. So although certainly not the primary cause of PCOS yet, hindi pa natin masabi EDCs ba talaga ang malaking contributory factor bakit may PCOS tayong mga babae, but certainly nakikita na maraming experts yung contribution, yung malaking or strong contribution ng EDCs sa etiology or pathogenesis ng PCOS, or at least man lamang modify the presentation of PCOS. Now, as Dr. Lee Clark has already mentioned, there are about thousands of chemicals identified as EDCs that affect us in our daily living. Foremost na dyan yung laging sinasabi ni Dr. Clark, yung BPA. Where do you see BPA? These are plastic contaminants. Phthalates also found in plasticizers. Fungicides, pesticides, herbicides, industrial solvents, nabanggit na rin po ni Dr. Ryan, mga lubricants and their byproducts, they're all considered EDCs, even lead, and a lot more that I haven't really mentioned. So, bakit nga po ba, ano po bang kinalaman ng EDC sa reproduction? Bakit po kami medyo nagiging interesado na sa role of EDCs? Because EDCs can actually mimic endogenous hormones po. Therefore, if they mimic endogenous hormones, they have the ability to interact directly with our hormone receptors dito sa katawan po natin, either as agonist or antagonist. And therefore, if they interact with our hormone receptors, they can trigger different molecular pathways that are responsible for homeostasis and especially sa reproductive process po nating mga babae. Now, EDCs, they have extensive effects on the body. No, they have been considered among the strongest risk factors for the development of metabolic disorders, and that includes obesity. Imagine, no, nabanggit rin po ito ni Dr. Clark, nakikita na po nila yung connection between EDCs and bakit obese yung ibang mga tao kahit wala naman sa genes nila, no? So, they have also seen connections between EDCs and infertility, as I already mentioned, endometriosis, myoma, and even cancers, some form of cancers, some hormone-dependent cancers are now being linked to EDCs. Now, one of the things na nabanggit po ni Dr. Lee Clark was the timing of exposure to EDCs. Very important po yan to emphasize on because the timing of exposure bears a great impact in the development of the detrimental health consequences. What do I mean by timing of exposure? Because EDCs can affect the fetus, no? Habang buntis po o pinagbubuntis niyo po yung baby niyo, yan pwede na pong maapektuhan yung baby niyo or pwede rin po kayo maapektuhan through adult exposure. Now, the strongest and most, should I say, lasting and more important impact for the effects of EDC happen during fetal development. So pag na-expose na sa EDCs during fetal development, yun po ang pinakamas malala na effect ng EDC. Why? Why is that so? Because this is when the organ systems and endocrine homeostasis are being established, no? And experts believe that the long and constant exposure to environmental factors from prenatal stage, meaning from fetal stage, up to puberty or even into adulthood have been suggested to result in the expression of PCOS phenotypes and especially among genetically predisposed individuals. Now, how about naman po yung adult exposure to EDCs? Bakit po kami interesado po dyan? Now, based on experimental models po, there are currently two theories on the possible mechanisms of EDCs that may affect ovulation and, of course, fertility. Number one, they can directly interfere at the level of the ovary. And number two, they can also interfere with the level of the brain, yung hypothalamus, pituitary, and ovarian axis. Now, studies have shown that high concentrations of BPA, yung component po ng plastics, sa mga infertile women, they found very high concentrations of BPA in the follicular fluid among infertile PCOS women. And they were seen to have a negative impact on the granulosa cells. Granulosa cells po yung cells ng ovary, and that can lead to decreased expression of aromatase enzyme and estradiol synthesis, now leading to an ovulation o yung hirap po mangitlog, no? Hindi po nangingitlog ang mga babae. Pag hindi mangitlog ang mga babae or madalang mangitlog, ano po ang long-term effect? Infertility, no? Hirap pag-conceive, hirap magbuntis. Now, BPA also can cause hormonal disruption po of by modulation of a variety of receptors, sex receptors, like halimbawa estrogen receptors, progesterone receptors. Now, this can potentially disrupt ovarian steroidogenesis, and this pathway also interfere with the intrafollicular environment. Thereby, again, no, punta ulit tayo dun sa pathway ng hirap mag-ovulate and therefore hirap din pong mag-conceive, no? Mag-conceive or maging may problema sa fertility. BPA concentrations also were found to be elevated in adolescents, no? Batang-bata pa lang, no? May nakita nila yung mga adolescent adolescents na may PCOS, nakita nila na mataas din daw po yung BPA concentrations nila doon. And they found that there's a positive correlation also among these PCOS adolescents with very high androgen concentration were noted among this cohort of patients, suggesting that BPA may play a role in the pathogenesis of PCOS in this age group. And also, as a last na lang po na statement, and nabanggit din po ito ni Dr. Lee Clark, that EDCs are strongly suspected to be obesogens. Obesogens meaning molecules that modify fat storage and lipid homeostasis, thereby promoting fat accumulation, resulting in obese individuals. So ibig sabihin, nakikita na rin po ng mga experts na indeed, EDCs may contribute to the alarming rate of obesity, not only here in the Philippines, but also worldwide. And being obese, of course, will affect the fertility of women. Okay, yun lang muna po. I don't want to go into so many details because I don't want to bombard you with so many details on reproductive endocrinology, but those are, I think, what is the most important to impart, and the knowledge is most important to impart to all of you now.
Okay, thank you very much. Ina, maraming salamat. You can see all the clapping and the hearts and all. And we probably have time, Raymond, for one or two questions because
Yes.
we will end at the top of the hour. But Raymond, go ahead with whatever questions you have there.
No, there's one from in the Q&A. I'm not sure if Dr. Clark was able to answer, but I'll read it. This comes from Dr. Joseph Tortona. Can there be warning labels in all products that may potentially affect our hormones? If not, why not just impose a total ban on products or goods with ingredients components from the market potentially affecting our hormonal system? Is there any way for the public to be made aware of which ingredients available in the market that can potentially affect our hormonal system so we can avoid purchasing them? For Dr. Clark.
Thank you, Sir Raymond and Ma'am Susie and Ina for that reaction. For that question, it's pretty packed, no? But I'd like to answer it like first. Yes, we are trying to work with, of course, agencies. Like if we have like warning labels, that will really be good. But it will really entail that we bring evidence for these products, no? Because of course, we cannot just totally ban them. We know already that there's some chemicals that are hazardous and they're already they've been banned internationally and nationally. This, for example, is BPA. Unfortunately, as I've said in my presentation, many of these chemicals are not inherently bad. They are useful. However, we really need to reassess. Secondly, industries, of course, may economic implications, no? And in terms of production, meron ding issue about disclosure, no? Because sometimes there are trade secrets, there are some ingredients that they do not put out there. And so that's another thing that perhaps the government can strengthen in terms of policies. From our end, there is really a need for us to advocate and lobby. But of course, when we lobby, we have to make sound, scientific, arguments, because we cannot just stop all these. And what we're talking about here, of course, the EDCs, as an addition, they are found actually all over already, no? Since I was really alluding to the fact that if you look back at history, nandyan na siya, and hindi natin sila pwedeng matanggal lahat-lahat, no? But what we can do is really first, una, avoid hanggat maaari. Actually, mahirap siyang i-avoid kasi even in our water, our food system, they are there. So, yun na nga, ang concern dito is that it's a tricky issue, because while it's sort of like slowly it has some effects, and the challenge for us really to be able to show those long-lasting effects. And like for Ina and myself, no, we are really trying to engage into, ang pinakamadali kasi minsan na gawin is pakita yon sa ano, no, sa mga biosamples, no, and be able to show that there's really some high levels. But as I said, unfortunately, hindi siya kamukha ng toxic dose response, yung food poisoning ka or magkakaroon ka ng chemical poisoning, but it's a slow release, no, in the environment, and we are being changed actually as we speak with all the consumption that we are doing. So yun siguro muna, but of course lobbying the government, making sure that we have good arguments, having policies for us to be able to decrease and curb. And food labeling, of course, very important yan, and we've gone into that. Pero yung disclosure pa din, meron pa rin tayong kailangang ayusin doon sa part na yon, because hindi lahat kaya nating papayagan ang mga industries, no, tsaka yung mga manufacturers.
Pero ma'am, I just
Yes,
want to
Ina,
ano
yeah.
I see some awareness na po in some manufacturers. You
Yeah,
can
sure.
see the manufacturers of some baby bottle products, di ba po? Or yung mga packaging ng mineral water, and even some meat products. They put there na nga, no BPAs, di ba po? May nakalagay sila.
Yeah,
So
sure.
that's a good start, ma'am, no? That's a very good start na
Mm-mm.
people are becoming aware of all these the effects ng mga
Ano yun,
EBCs.
maganda talaga yung huge awareness, and as I said, nagsimula yan sa, hindi lang naman sa atin side, but like because now the world is very connected, no? So yung manufacturer minsan manggagaling dito sa ibang bansa, yung tapos papasok, no? Hindi natin alam kung ano yung mga nilalagay, no? So but it's a global, as I said, global solution, and of course we are all interconnected because of the trade. So yung BPA is a good start. Nilalagay na no BPA for feeding bottles, lahat ng mga plastics. Also microwavable,
Yes, that's right.
yung mga plastics na yon,
Plastics,
very
po.
important yan. Nilalagay na nila kung microwavable o yung hindi. So
Sure.
siguro yung sa ating mga sa public, kapag ka may mga nakalagay na ganun, minsan kasi nagmamadali yung mga tao in terms of yung sa pagkain, di ba? Or nire-recycle natin. We should really be aware and conscious about perhaps the shelf life lang, yung hanggang saan mo gagamitin yung mga plastics na yon, no? Yung kasi nandoon siya, and then of course yung sa pangluto, yung mga non-stick pans, even carpets and vinyls, anything that has to do with like waterproofing, making it dirt and dirt resistant, yun yung mga issues dyan na actually kailangan nating i-balance, no, in terms of decisions.
Well, thank you so much to our speakers. We'd like to go on, but unfortunately, we're out of time, and we really appreciate all the effort that went into making the presentations.
Yes, very much.
Audience really appreciated everything, and we probably need to have a part 2 with more details about what some practical tips that people can do. So thank you very much to our doctors. And Raymond, let's wrap up now.
Yes, thank you so much to Dr. Lee Clark and Dr. Ina Robon. They're products po of the Philippine General Hospital's Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology. So we'll be showing po on the screen our panel evaluation poll. Ito po, wala po kaming hiwalay na sinesend out. Ito lang po iyon. We would like to hear what you think about the webinar po, no? And something that we really will be interested in trying to understand more on what makes you tick. Ano po ba yung mas gusto nyong lumalabas? And in terms of the quality of the speakers that we have. So number 1, panelists demonstrated thorough knowledge of the topic. Number 2, panelists were well prepared and organized. Number 3, panelists spoke clearly and audibly. Number 4, panelists used appropriate language with technical medical jargons adequately explained. And finally, panelists contributed to new perspectives and knowledge managing various key health issues. So we will not be closing this until the end of the webinar po, no? And I think for next week, wala po muna tayo. Just a quick announcement again. We will be having a break lang po as we try to make preparations for our reformatting. And we will be back on February 9th, which is 2 Fridays from now, with hopefully something that's a little bit more appealing and exciting po sa inyong lahat. So before we conclude our program, All Stop COVID Deaths webinars are archived for viewing at the TVUP YouTube channel. Kapareho po nito yung mga YouTube shorts po natin. So if you just go to youtube.com/TVUPPH or you open up your app in YouTube and then search for TVUP, lalabas na po doon all 177 webinars, and after today 178 webinars na po siya. So this formally closes our webinar for the week. Magkikita-kita po tayo again next Friday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. po. 1 hour na lang po tayo. It's a date.
Together we can stop preventable deaths.
So keep safe, keep healthy, and see you online.